Welcome to another episode of the How to Save the World podcast, where we take a deep dive into the academic research and behavioural science of what really gets people to take pro-environmental action and behaviour. I'm your host, Katie Patrick. I'm an environmental engineer and a designer based in Silicon Valley, California, and I'm the author of the book, How to Save the World. Hello, green friend. Have you ever looked out onto a road and wished that it was different? Like less traffic, more trees, a bike lane, less parking, more walkable, or just safer from traffic? We've probably all had these thoughts before and then assumed that a road is a fixed thing and not really thought of changing it or that we even had the power to. But contrary to this assumption, roads can be changed by regular people like you and me, and they are changed to be safer, greener, and more bike-friendly all of the time. You just need to know how to do it. Today's guest is my good friend, Courtney. Tim spent most of his career as a community manager of your favourite childhood company, Lego, and he is also a car-free and pro-bike enthusiast. I invited Tim onto the show because he did something that was quietly pretty badass in his home neighbourhood of Oakland, California, and I wanted to document the exact process he took here on the How to Save the World podcast. Although he is an intelligent professional guy, he was not a paid member of the city planning department or of any Green Streets NGO or has a PhD in urban design. Yet, despite doing this stuff off his own back and doing it in a super hacky, startup-y style, he got his city to install a series of roundabouts, also known as traffic circles here in the USA, and other traffic calming measures in record-breaking time along his dangerously speed-prone street. And his street was so bad that he even has photos of cars that have crashed and caught on fire on the very street he lives on. Now let's dive into our conversation with Courtney and the exact 12 steps it took to get his local government to change a road that was called the 8th Street Project. Now, these 12 steps are also written out on a tutorial on my climate action design email tutorials that you can get by signing up to Hello World E. That's Hello World with an E on the end.com/action tips. You'll get this and several other detailed tutorials on how to make change happen that you will not find anywhere else online. Before we dive in, I wanted to let you know that the School of Climate Action Design is now open for enrollment, and I would love to invite you to apply. It's an online community and 6-week co-design lab where we help environmental leaders like you build campaigns that successfully trigger behaviours that scale into real movements of change. You can apply at helloworlde.com. The link is in the show notes. And I tell you what, I'm 45 now, and if I could give my 25-year-old environmental engineer self one piece of advice, it would be to learn behavior design. Once I finally understood what drives human behavior and how to design it, my whole world changed. It unlocked this new ability, and I started having the best ideas I'd ever had and continue to that don't just get stuck in the usual 2 or 5% engagement rates, but somehow burst into people's motivation and get these dramatic results like 40 or even 70% shift in engagement. And this is not special to me. It is a system, a formula, a recipe, and you can learn it too. You just need to know how to put the ingredients together. If your green program is stuck and not getting the traction that you want, it's not because your community doesn't care or lacks knowledge or you don't have enough funding. It might seem like this on the surface, but these are rarely the real bottleneck. It's because you don't have an action system, and you're probably making at least one of these common mistakes. Number 1, you're doing all education with no defined action trigger. Number 2, you don't have an engagement funnel with specific moments of conversion. Or 3, people are dropping off because there's too much cognitive load or poor choice architecture. If you confuse, you lose, and it's incredibly easy to do, especially when we are talking about complex topics like the Earth. The action system you need is an evidence-based method that attracts the right people, builds motivation, and triggers a behavior, all along a central axis of your core feedback loop that I call the God metric. Inside the School of Climate Action Design, I teach the exact models I use working with groups like UNEP, Stanford and Harvard University, Google, NASA, and many small NGOs and clean tech startups around the world. We cover fundamentals like the action triad, that is the smallest core building block of change you need to get right. We map a detailed blueprint of your target person's pathways to action called behavior mapping that includes 96 different behavioral triggers. And you'll create a 6-step engagement funnel, a sequence of stepping stones that guides people to complete the action, as well as gamification, the 12-step storytelling formula, visual design essentials, and more. And it includes my new and favorite program, Earth Doctors, 12 weeks of gamified sustainability STEAM activities for kids and classrooms. If you are ready to shift from fuzzy, stab-in-the-dark sustainability to becoming a crystal-clear designer of change, supported by a community of PhD environmental psychologists and world-class design mentors, please pause this episode and apply now at helloworlde.com. Don't be the team that spends years or millions on a campaign that ends with, "It didn't work." Invest the 6 weeks, learn the things, and master the art of designing change. Let's have no sustainability campaign left behind. Enrollment is now open by application only, and we only run it once a year, so don't miss out. Apply at helloworlde.com. The link is in the show notes. And I promise you, you really can change the world and you can make it fun. And now let's dive into the conversation with Tim.
Hey, Katie. How's it going?
Excellent. So thrilled to jump into this topic. It sounds really complicated and confusing for a lot of us. I don't even think a lot of us even think that we even can do it. And Tim has done it. So he's going to take us through his all of the steps, the complete A to Z of his project that is called, what's it called, Tim?
It's Ink Street. So I'm in West Oakland, California. The neighborhood is called Prescott. And we're kind of, if you know the geography, we're by the port of Oakland. We're by the BART station. BART is our subway system, our light rail. The idea came about during the 2020, during the pandemic. We're all locked down. I was actually relatively new to the neighborhood and had been talking to some longtime residents in a community garden because that was about the only thing you could do is be outside with people, at a distance. And I had asked, hey, what needs to be done in this neighborhood? And at the time, people were really speeding quite aggressively down our residential street.
So you've started this project in your own community. It is called Safe 8th Street. You've done it all off your own back with your own friends and your own community. And Safe 8th Street, from what I understand, you have gotten a 1-mile stretch of road where you live, your own road, and you got the local city to put in multiple roundabouts, also called traffic circles, and speed humps to make the traffic go slower. And you managed to get this whole thing done at what you mentioned, lightning speed, within a couple of years, a kind of an unheard of speed to get the city to do these traffic calming measures. Can you tell me about what was going on in this streetscape, like the problems that you were facing? You got a whole, you got a mile of road, and this road is just not built right. What was the problem that you were working with?
Yeah, the problem was that we had a lot of people just using it as a cut through, like a local residential street as a cut through to 2 other neighborhoods, right? And so they weren't people who lived kind of in this middle stretch. They were on either end, and they were speeding and they were being reckless. This is kind of a typical what we've seen, in fact, a little bit more of in a lot of cities. Just people when the roads were a lot more clear and less traffic, people started driving a lot more dangerously. And there are the kind of people who are really aggressive with their cars, right? And make it really unsafe for people outside the car. As an example, that summer when we were advocating, there were, I think, 2 or 3 instances where cars actually came up into yards and hit or almost hit houses. And so we were able to capture video and photos of the aftermath of that.
What do you mean, a car going into a yard? Like the car went so fast that it came off the road and ended up in someone's front yard?
Or there was a collision at an intersection and you're playing pool, right? The balls go in that middle direction, right? And it ends up in someone's yard.
That's
pretty scary stuff. Terrifying. And then there was a car on fire too. There was somebody doing donuts and they hit a pole, and people are texting me pictures of a car a block away just engulfed in flames. Stuff you kind of you see it in Mad Max, and you think, oh my goodness, that's crazy, but it was actually happening on our street.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting example of the question that people ask me all the time, which is why do we need to look at individual behavior when what we need is systems change? And the way to understand that question is that there is this interrelationship between how systems drive behavior, right? And so
It
the nature
reinforces, yes.
Yeah, so
and
the nature
this
of
was a bit of both, you know?
Yeah, so you've got humans have a propensity for behavior, but this road enabled this behavior.
Exactly.
It kind of created by its design this behavior. So then you have to design the system to allow the people to behave in the appropriate way. And that really is what behavior design is. It's not like, let's just go up to everybody and let's give them a gold star when they don't speed. It's really looking at the system.
You change the environment and that changes their behavior.
And that is the nature of sort of what we're trying to get into in this podcast is how do we understand human psychology and understand how to change these systems to get the behavior that we want. There's just a bit of overarching kind of theoretical tone of
My understanding of your entire message, right, is helping change people's behavior so that they do more environmentally friendly things. And I'm probably less up to date on the sort of exact facts and figures and statistics. Cars, obviously, emissions, tire particulates, and then the public health emergency really that we're in with traffic injuries and deaths, right? If you want people to walk more, if you want them to take the bus, if you want them to ride a bicycle, you've got to make it safe and comfortable to do so. And not just for a middle-aged guy like me who's fairly competent and maybe stupidly fearless, but that you would be comfortable letting your daughter go a mile down the street to the store to pick up some groceries or a snack for herself, right? Or an aging parent who's maybe a little bit less mobile. So you want to create an environment that's calm and comfortable and people are driving more slowly so that they're gonna see and be able to avoid these sort of they're not, we call them accidents, but really it's predictable and preventable because the way we design our streets, these things are inevitable. So we have the system that we have because of the way that our roads have been designed.
Yeah. Well, we have the kind of the behavioral responses to the way the road is designed.
Yes.
Okay, so you've got all this going on. Now, most people would just see it and they would think oh, that's just the way it is. The world is fixed. Roads are literally set in concrete or asphalt. I don't think it really crosses your mind that we have any agency over these or any ability to do it. What got you thinking I, not doing it as my formal job as a traffic engineer, what made you think I can actually do this? What got you thinking firstly, you thought I can do it. I have the skills, I can do it. And then actually got you turning it from the idea into actually putting the steps in place. What triggered that in you?
Well, I didn't know I could do it. I thought I could do it. I thought that I could make an attempt that was better than most because I had a little bit of experience trying and failing. There was no big sort of lightning bolt from the sky moment or whatever. My background kind of led me to this point to really have this kind of strong opinion and belief that this is the way that our streets should be. They should be safe for people. But a fun, a really inspiring quote that I like to go off of, and I'm not going to get it completely right, but Steve Jobs gave a commencement speech at one point, and he's like, don't forget that the way the world was designed by people who are no smarter than you and me, right? And just that telling any person out there in the world that actually everything you see that's currently now was just made by other people. You're a person, and you can make it different. And so that's the message that I would like to send to anyone, that you can have an influence. Maybe you can't control the outcome, but you can have an influence on how your street, how your city is designed. You can plant a tree. You can get a stop sign. You can get a speed hump. And so I got to this point because for the past little over 7 years, I was in a job that took me back and forth to Denmark about 4 times a year. And I would spend an extended period of time there. So I never lived there, but I would spend at least a couple weeks on every trip.
Tell us about that job. It's a cool job.
It's a cool job.
I didn't jump into your background and your profession, but just say it in a nutshell.
Sure. Most of my career has been working with Lego, the toy company, and they're based in Denmark. And what I did was I was responsible for the community around Lego ideas. And so if you've been in a Lego store and you've seen the Lego idea sets, that's where Lego fans from around the world can design what they want to be a Lego set and then submit it kind of like a Kickstarter. People vote for it, right? They don't pledge money, but they vote. And then Lego designers review the idea. And every year, several times a year, they pick a few sets to produce. And that fan earns a royalty off of the set, and they get put in the Lego store, their idea remade by a Lego designer. So I was building up the early days of Lego ideas, and we had this kind of small startup garage kind of department where we were like the entire soup to nuts in a little group of folks, and we did everything end to end. And I did all the front end, like the website, the copy, but also just moderation, publicity, communications, and everything interacting with those fan designers. And so it was really a cool job. And it was really neat to work not only with my favorite toy, but still a hobby of mine, but also with just some of the most passionate and creative people that I've ever met in terms of like the fans who are coming up with all these creative ideas.
Oh, so this I just realized there's this whole other dimension to our conversation that I had not thought of. So I thought we were just going to talk about government planning steps, which we will. But this whole big chapter of your career where you were building Legos or encouraging the community to build Lego worlds, kind of like built this framework in your mind that you could just like kind of recreate streets, which is this big sort of part of my big imagination theme that I'm into, that I think if we can imagine these worlds and we can build them in 3D and we can do them in AI and we can draw them, it creates this basic mental template that I can change the world. So you're like a perfect example of how like doing like little mini sort of toy versions of changing the world, like literally changing the world, actually led to you really actually going and changing the world.
Here you have these people who, and every time I would talk to someone, obviously there's this community of like really passionate Lego fans that are all connected to conventions. They have local clubs. And I came from that hobbyist community. And so I knew a lot of those folks myself. But also just when I would talk to anyone out and about and they would find out what I did, everyone says, well, Lego should make this, right? And that's exactly what we did. We allowed an everyday person to tell a big giant corporation what they should put in their factory and do on their production line and share with the world. But the reason why it was important for me to bring up going to Denmark is that I saw the environment that was radically different than anything that I had at home. So you had streets that were more human scale. You had cars driving a lot more carefully, people driving a lot more carefully. And then you had in just a sidewalk, you had an asphalt, a smooth bike lane that was physically a brick height up from the street, right? It wasn't like a piece of paint, a front paint on the road that people park in, right? But it was actually physically separate from the roadway. And then you had everyone cycling. No one was wearing a helmet because they really didn't have to, but they were in suits and they were in dresses and they were in, creative clothing and not like Lycra and high bright yellow and pads and whatever, right? But they were just regular people going about their daily lives. And it kind of felt like an Instagram post, but it's just the world around you. And I thought, this is so cool. Like, I really want this environment at home and I want this lifestyle. Why can't I have it? And I was living in Hartford, Connecticut at the time. Hartford, like half of the downtown is just surface parking lots. It was eviscerated for moving cars in and out from the suburbs every day. The city itself was destroyed. Like a lot of American cities weren't built for cars. They were destroyed for cars, right?
Interesting quote. We're going to put that on the Instagram. Do you want to just say it again? Just say it again. It was really strong.
American cities weren't built for cars. They were destroyed for cars. We had beautiful architecture in dense, walkable cities with great public transit 100 years ago. And it was systematically dismantled over decades in the mid-century to create the kind of, hostile spaces that you see today. There was that gap, and it just ate at me. I would come home from a trip to Denmark, and I would be like depressed and angry for a couple of weeks. And I got involved in Hartford, and I thought I had all this energy. I was this smart innovation guy working for the coolest company in the world. Surely I can fix this fast, so everyone should just listen to me about how to do it. And that was really, really naive, because the public process and the way that cities and states budget and apply resources and the way that projects are scoped and community engagement is done. Not only that, but the highway codes and the engineering codes that dictate the design standards limit a lot of times the kind of awesome stuff that you see works in a European city. We're just not allowed to build it here. We're physically capable of doing it, right? But we're just not allowed to do it.
Parking spaces and stuff. Like you need so many parking spaces.
Parking minimums, turning radius on an intersection. I'm not a traffic engineer. I've just picked up these kind of words along the way and realizing what limits some of the cool things. Or like, I mean, to save other examples. So I got quite involved in that community, was really energetic, but then I flamed out within a couple of years because I realized just how much kind of inertia and resistance and how much time it took. Fast forward, I had moved out to California. I had been in the South Bay for a couple of years. I wasn't really active in this kind of space. And then when I moved to Oakland and I found a very diverse community racially and income-wise, kind of right between San Francisco and Oakland, like the downtowns. So it's like the direct metro stop between the two city centers. And it was just quite kind of under-resourced and disinvested. And it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And now I've learned a lot more about the neighborhood and the history and the people. But I thought, I've got energy for this. When the neighbor said, we've got to slow the cars down. So I'd seen what was possible. I had tried and failed, and I had consumed a lot of online content and really network with activists around the country and around the world, making streets, safer for people cycling and walking. And I thought, I've got some time. Pandemic was an odd time for a lot of us. I was fairly depressed and out of work at the time, and I needed a project, right? And so all I knew was I knew kind of how to poke at this. And so I started looking up on the city's website, and your city's going to be different than mine, but I found that we had a program where they had money that was raised from a bond, from a tax, that was over a 5-year period used to pave streets. And they would go and check what are all the worst streets in the city. And they made a map of them and they made a schedule. And they said, this street's going to be scheduled in this year and that street's going to be scheduled in that year. And I knew from what I had learned before that it's always cheaper to ask them to do something when they're already doing a project. Construction-wise, I'm not in construction. I'm in tech and software products, right? So I know that if I want something changed, and if you're in the part of the code that kind of affects that, then we package the different tasks during that when you're working on that part of the system, right? And that's a lot cheaper to roll it in than just doing it as a one-off request. So I saw that it was 2020. I saw that my street, 8th Street, would be repaved in 2023. And so I started emailing the city and saying, hey, when you repave this, can you put in traffic circles and can you put in speed humps? I got clear first on what I wanted. I walked around. I looked at a map. I already had an idea of these different elements in my head. And I said, this is what the intersections with the stoplight, it's more expensive to do a roundabout there. So we'll do some concrete medians. And then on the intersections, the small intersections with the stop signs, that should have a circle, right? And in between the block, there should be a hump so that people aren't gunning it in the middle, right? Either. And so I got clear on what I wanted and I started asking for what I wanted. At the same time, because I was a newcomer to a racially diverse neighborhood and a predominantly Black neighborhood as a white guy, I thought, I need to ask people what they want and not come in and tell people what they should have. And so with some long-term neighbors, created these flyers, created a survey, and posted them on all the light poles with little tear-offs. And that went to a Google Forms. And because of my background running this public community for Lego, I actually know how to write surveys that aren't biased or leading the audience, but I also knew how to frame the questions so that they could select the things that I had already conceived would be good use. And so I found that those ideas that I had were actually popular, right, from the options that were given. And over time, it built up a mailing list. So in the end, I had a mailing list of about 60 people. Whenever a car would crash or hit a house or catch on fire. People who I didn't even know would send me messages because they all had my information from the survey that they took, and they were all invested in this process and they were all supporting this. So all I could do was come out with my phone and take some pictures and record some video of the aftermath, right? At a respectful distance. And then I stored that away. The city told me that there wasn't money for this. And that's another point I think that people need to understand is that, and I didn't understand public budgets. There's a difference between a capital budget and an operating budget in cities. And a capital budget is for things like streetscape improvements and infrastructure, build new infrastructure or new buildings, new schools, new fire stations. The operating budget is your day-to-day, like your salaries, right? Your operating expenses, things like that. So even if the city has a certain kind of budget, it's like, well, what kind of funds are those? And what are they planned out for? And on what planning cycles are they every year, every 2 years, sometimes cities budget. And so there wasn't money for this. And I just kind of refused to take that for an answer. And so the next step was, well, I have to demonstrate how bad the problem is. And so a couple things happened that summer that we did. One, I actually built a sensor that we put in the side of the house that tracked how many cars went by and how fast they were going. And so we did that with an open source project that I found online. Someone in the UK had done the same thing. And I bought a Raspberry Pi, which is a small computer, right? That fits on a little card, like about the size of a phone. And then a camera that attached to it. It's another circuit board kind of thing, and put that into a housing that could go outdoors. And we put that on the house, and that was connected to our Wi-Fi, and it was just connected to a Google Sheet. It was very basic. And every time a car would drive by, it would write a line on the Google Sheet that said what direction it was going and how fast it was going. And I would actually take a picture of the car too, but I didn't want to create enemies, so I didn't share those pictures. They were kind of blurry. And there was a secret part of me that wanted to shame the people who were driving 90 miles an hour down my street, but I knew better. And so we had the data over time of like how fast the average speed was, the count of how many cars were going in different blocks of speeds, and like that high speed for the day. And every time I would get, a couple times a day, I would get 60 or 70 miles an hour. And sometimes I would get 80 or 90. And I also didn't know exactly how accurate it was, but I felt like it was within a 10%, error. It's a homebrew project, but it was just enough to collect enough data to kind of dramatize and illustrate the point of what was going on. So I created some charts of the data that I collected, and I opened up a Twitter account and I started tagging people with infographics that I made of the speeds.
When you say tagging who?
Public officials, other activists.
Tagging your government, right.
Tagging my government and just saying, hey, there's this problem over here. Here's this graph. Do something about it. Or here's this big scary number. Do something about it. And kind of one of the people in one of the bike organizations in Oakland, I had asked them for advice, or maybe they volunteered it, I forget. But they said, well, this is good, but what you really need to do is you need to share people's stories. Like you need to make it really personal. And so I had all this data. And then after that, what I did was I organized a day of filming. So we took an afternoon and I met up with 5 or 6 neighbors, and I just ran video interviews on my phone out on the street in front of some of these sites. And I took that interview, I'd ask them some questions, and I cut that up into a 2-minute video segment with a story. And I spliced it with the video and the photos that I took of the car crashes. And I spliced that with still graphics of the infographics of the data. And so I had 5 videos. And what we did was we posted those on our Twitter account, and I spaced them out every other day. So it was like a week and a half. Every second day, there would be a new video drop, right? Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Monday, Wednesday, something of that nature. And I tagged people again, and I promoted that to our neighbors and to various, say, Facebook groups or other people I knew, mostly on Twitter. I hadn't met a lot of these people in person yet. And that got some legs. And we were then covered in the local sort of like Safe Streets blog called Streets Blog. And so that was our first actual media article about our issue, which was the goal. I knew that it was easy to get a media outlet like that, who was focused on the issue that we were focused on, to take and boost this content. From there, my neighbor Tamara and I, she has a media and PR background. I have done some media and PR and publicity myself. So she and I teamed up and we started pitching newspapers and TV stations. And what we did was we used the first article that we got in the Streets blog to say, well, here's some coverage that we have. Do you want to cover the story as well? So Christmas Eve of 2020, Tamara and I are out on the street with the news cameras, and they're interviewing us about this issue in front of one of the houses that was hit by one of the cars. I think even during the filming, someone drove by recklessly, which of course illustrates the point. And then we were on that evening's news.
So which news station was this? Local
It was
Bay
a
Area
local
news?
NBC Bay Area, something like that.
Like
I can't remember the
NBC
exact-
local news? Yeah.
Yeah. And so then my friend Warren, who was the then mayor's director of transportation. So he worked in the mayor's office. He oversaw the Department of Transportation. Every week he was asking me for a phone call because now we had created this public issue, right? And clearly I was being very critical of the city not acting on this problem. And the trick that I use at that point in time is, as soon as you have someone's attention, you just turn really nice. Like, these are people who are doing the best they can. They know how big the problem is, and they get a lot of people who are yelling at them or being mean to them, right? But before I go into that, I actually I skipped over a really important point about all this.
Oh, wait! I missed the bit about Warren because I'm also writing down the notes. So who is Warren? And he was at the traffic part of the mayor's office. What was that step?
Yeah, exactly. Warren was the director of transportation.
Director of transportation
for the mayor.
Yep.
So he oversaw the department. He wasn't the department head, but he was kind of the mayor's liaison for the transportation policy.
And was he your friend or the guy you were criticizing?
I was criticizing the institution.
Okay.
I said to my friend, in the years that have passed, Warren and I have become friends.
But he wasn't a friend at the
He was not a friend at the time. He was just a guy on the internet who worked for the...
Oh, okay. And he was trying to contact you to help resolve this issue, right?
Yes.
And was he kind of on your side?
Probably to get me to stop being so critical in the media.
Was he kind of like on your side, trying to contact you or trying to shut you up?
He was on our side. He was saying, here's how it works. Warren's really good at explaining how government works, but he's also, here's what the process is going to look like. And this is all like, maybe it's a bit, I know this is a bit of an outlier case, but this is my story and how it happened. And I hope that people can replicate it and see similar in their own city. I skipped over something really important though for the audience. And that is that during the fall, when I mentioned I was emailing the city and saying, you're going to install these things when you do you're paving it to put in some speed humps, put in some traffic circles. I know that's kind of like small, budget increase. There's certain amount of, resource that needs to be done with design and engineering and making it all compliant and stuff. But I just wasn't accepting no. And at one point in time, someone emailed me back from the city and they said, here's this program over here and this form. It's due in 3 days. Go fill it out. And that was what's called Oakland's Capital Improvement Program. So when I mentioned that public budgets have a capital and operating budget, this was public input for the capital budget for the city. And every 2 years, Oakland's budget is refreshed. And so they have, I'm not sure every city does this, but Oakland accepts submissions from the public, and then they are put through a scoring system on equity and on other factors.
Wait, so sorry to interrupt. Was this form only able to be filled out like once every 2 years, like the deadline? Like you had 3 days to get into a
deadline's every 2 years. And I sent an email that week. I alternated between being like really kind of despondent about this hopeless situation and being really angry. And for whatever reason, I think there was probably some jerk on the street that pissed me off that day.
But that's
And I wrote the
crazy.
city an email.
That's crazy. You've got,
And when
yeah.
they emailed me back and they said, go fill out this form.
And if you missed it, it would have been another 2 years before you could
I
have
wouldn't have been
gotten
standing here like
in.
no one. I wouldn't have had a success on my street. I would have been this probably jilted person
would
that
have
was
just gotten,
ignored by
like-
their city.
Yeah, I've been bored. But so if you don't know that there are these like 2-year cycles and every city is going to be different, like you need to know that that is there, and you need to know that there is a form and you can actually
And my
access it.
story is like so much of this is kind of like the persistence led to luck, right? It wasn't, I mean, there was some skill, like, but some of it kind of just happened fortuitously because I kept at it, right? This was the ability to get, so what the city did was Warren spoke with me on the phone in December, January, and then he said, this isn't public yet, but here's the kind of the preliminary results of this. And our project scored like second to the cutoff. So of all the projects in Oakland that the public submitted, then the scoring number was like second to the bottom. They only have so much money or whatever to allocate.
You mean it was low? It was like a bad score.
No, it was a high enough
score, sorry.
score. The lowest of the good. The second of the cutoff line. Right?
Wait. So it was above the cutoff line or under the cutoff line?
It was above the cutoff line.
But like at the very bottom of the cutoff line?
At the very bottom.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so it was $500,000 extra from the capital funds to do the design and the construction work for the 1 mile segment that was being paved and all the stop signs were going to get a traffic circle. In between, we're going to get a speed hump. And at the stoplight intersections, we're going to have like a concrete median where you can't cut over and make a wide, fast turn. And those were the elements that we were going to get. And then it was going to be installed in 2023. Now it was 2021, so I was still upset that it was going to take 2 years because they have 2 years of continued problems. But that was really, really incredible. And so that summer of 21, it was actually ratified in the city's budget. And then for about a year, not a lot happened. And then the design work started and the engagement started. And and then in summer of last year, 2023, the road was paved. So for a couple months, we just had even faster reckless drivers.
It's like they've got the money. It's kind of funny because like, we don't have we have the money to cover it with asphalt again, but we don't have the money for like anything else.
And then in the fall, they put the speed humps in, right?
Yeah.
And so then it became halfway better, right? And then in the winter, in December, they put the traffic circles in. And as soon as the circles and the humps were in, oh my goodness, it was about a 95% drop. I mean, the kind of people who drive this aggressively with their cars, they kind of have an attitude about it. They're going to try to drive aggressively no matter what. So you'll see them kind of speeding up between the circle and the hump, but then they have to brake right away. And every time I walk by and I watch someone doing that, I'm just shading for it up.
It's just like a sort of you sort of observe this humiliating pattern. Someone like speeds up and then they like have to stop at the red light and you're just like, loser. Like no one feels cool doing that.
And it's like, I did that.
Let me ask a bit more about this process. So when you are filling out the capital improvement program form, and there's that $500,000 budget, do you just have a wish list of what you want and then they come back and tell you how much it costs? Or did you have to do any research about what you estimated this was going to cost? Because honestly,
I didn't have to cost estimate.
I have no idea. Did you have any idea what a roundabout cost?
No, I had no idea. I had no idea. And so, I mean, it came back. I didn't ask for a certain amount of money.
So you just asked for the roundabout and then they said,
I asked for the project. Here's the
problem. And then they came back and said how much it costs.
Solution that I want, right? And I said, I've got survey feedback from my neighbors saying that whatever the overwhelming percent, maybe 80% of the people supported all those elements. And there were like 1 or 2 people who were like, I don't want a traffic circle. Like one person said that, right? And so of my responses, I said, hey, here's broad support and like very little to no opposition for this. Here are the elements that I want. And this is kind of an ideal, in retrospect, it's an ideal situation. Sometimes if you try to make a change like this, you're going to even have like neighbors fighting you on it. If that's going to remove a parking space or it's going to be perceived to slow down their how fast they can drive or something like that. Sometimes this stuff is contentious. And if it wasn't contentious, I think for a couple reasons. One, I went out first and I asked people what needed to be done. And then I kept asking and I got more and more support from a diverse and broad base of people. And then the other element that I think it was somebody in the city that I was speaking to at an event one day said to me, yeah, I think the reason why your project didn't get a lot of resistance is because you weren't proposing to remove any car parking, that could be a whole other episode, right?
Yeah,
About
yeah.
the politics of like the perceived right to store private property on a public right of way. If I put my refrigerator out there, it would be a little bit of a different story, but somehow we all have this God-given right to store cars on the street. Anyway, that's another story for another day.
An insane story that needs to be unveiled. But yeah, we'll do
Books
more.
have been written about it. People have
Oof.
built entire careers researching the policies of parking. I'm thinking of Donald Shoup.
But that issue about community contentiousness is really important to this. So you were doing the community engagement, you were talking to people, you had the survey.
Yeah.
You weren't doing anything that
and
was
neighbors would introduce me, hey, this is Tim who's doing the thing, right? And so I just kind of like was outside because it was COVID and that's the only thing you could do. And a neighbor would introduce me around, and then people would get to know me, and I would ask for their input on the problem or their experience. And a lot of times people would shake their head at me and say, well, you're new and you kind of don't know how things go around here, but I don't think you're going to do it. And I said, well, are you going to oppose me on this, or do you support it? Oh yeah, we support it. Go do your thing. But I just don't think it's going to happen. But I'll take that. No one's fighting against me. They may not believe in me, but they're not fighting against me.
But that's a really important frame of mind, I think, to see all environmental change and what you brought up, which is to add something in the community, not to take, because a lot of the way environmental stuff is framed is that you have to give something up. Or maybe it was more in the past. It was you have to give up plastic. You have to give up meat. You have to give up cars. We have to stop being so greedy. We have to stop consuming so much. You need to give up your private jet. There's this whole narrative of trying to you're a bad person because you use too much and now you have to give something up. And that's kind of true that we do have to give up stuff, but you can frame it and you can tell the story is in more of an adding or more of a benefit. Imagine being able to grow your own food. Imagine not having to take the trash out and have plastic everywhere. Imagine having gardens and walkable paths.
Yeah, but walking really around a calm street with big shady trees and
really
cars that are driving by slowly, and people who are looking out for you, and neighbors you can wave at, right? Because they're outside because they feel safe and comfortable. Everybody deserves a residential street that's calm with slow traffic, where they don't have to fear if someone makes a mistake that it's going to end their life or it's permanently injure them, right? We all deserve each other. These are good things that we all deserve.
Yeah. And putting it in that benefit frame rather than a loss frame. I don't know if you've ever seen in psychology that the loss frame, in all marketing, they tell you this. It's always communicate a loss frame rather than a benefit frame, because it's much more psychologically sticky to feel like you lose something that you already have in your grasp rather than to get something new. If you lose $20, you're much more upset about losing $20 than if someone didn't give you $20 for free. And even though it's essentially the same amount of money, the loss of something you already have is more painful than the opportunity to kind of get something.
Right.
So you're really triggering a very sort of an inner, I don't know what you'd call it, just a psychological, not it's not a habit, but it's just a psychological nature of people that we don't want to lose something we already have in our grasp.
Right.
So to just be careful to not trigger that in people.
Think about how the public discourse has changed in the U.S. this summer with the election cycle. I mean, it's crazy as that is, and it's everywhere, and maybe we don't want to talk about it in detail, but that shift from the fear and hate and division to joy, right? And you've been talking about this for years, and it's kind of the same principle applied on a big stage. And I think it's at least something that it's oh, wow, this changed the tone. This changed the emotional tenor. Now I can think in possibilities and I can be excited, right? It's apply that same principle down to your local street, to your local community.
Yeah, it also kind of made me think of foot in the door technique. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah, right.
It's
get someone to give you a small yes, right? And then you can always ask for a little more.
Yeah. So I think, for example, I just think that you weren't asking to remove parking is a really big deal in this, because that's what I hear from a lot of people in this space. As soon as you start to want to take away people's parking spaces, people get really upset. And so and often it's what do you have there? Do you have trees and a garden and a bike path, or do you have cars? It's this fundamental thing of all urban planning and sustainability is this issue. And if people are really attached to these parking spaces, you won't be able to get them removed. So yeah, foot in the door technique is that if you ask somebody for a very small win, you kind of prime their psychology to accept the more bigger change later on. Or the big study that people talk about all the time, you might have heard it before. It's actually got to do with driving. So I'll have you heard it before about the signs? I'll mention it.
Sure, I have.
Okay, well, it's really pertinent to exactly what we're talking about with speeding. So the big study, I think it was done like 20 or 30 years ago. I have it in my book, and it gets talked about by lots of people, that a group went through a neighborhood and they asked people in the neighborhood to put up a sign. Like, they had two different test groups of the neighborhood. One group they asked to put up like a really big sign. Like, the sign was so big, it obscured like most of their front yard. And the sign said, please drive safely. Please drive safely. And most of them said no. I think something like 95% of these households said they were not going to put up the large sign. So they went to another neighborhood and they asked them to put up a small sign. I don't know how small, but like a small version of the sign. And the sign was so small that most of them said yes. I think in this case, it was like the equivalent of like 90% of people said, sure, we'll put in the sign. Now they went back to the same households that they put in the small sign 3 months later, and 67% of the ones with the small sign now accepted the big sign.
Yeah, I think I do. Now you've jogged my memory. I think I do remember the story. And to be clear, that was like a sign to put in their yard or their house. Or
they had to put it in the front yard.
It was not a street, a public sign. It was like in their yard.
No, they had to put it on their yard that faced out to the cars.
Okay, so you're kind of asking something of them. Put this sign on your private property, changes the view of your property, etc. Okay.
Yes. And once they got accustomed to the small ask, they were quite happy to take on the sort of next level. So when we're asking things of people, we want to like ask people in like levels of difficulty. Like you just ask them for something little and then they sort of get used to it, and then you ask them for something more. So if you're going in asking like, let's take away like all the parking, all the like get rid of the road completely, a lot of people quite likely oppose that. But if you just ask for something modest to start, you'll get everybody used to it. And then you'll be able to ask, like if you went back again and asked to remove some parking spaces, the more contentious stuff, you might have a high success rate in that you would have not have had if you hadn't already foot in the door your way to this level of community engagement and success that you've had.
Yeah. And so we're in a situation where like, I even kind of looked at it myself, and even with my predisposed biases, right, which I've exposed earlier by the way I talked about street parking, I didn't see the need to remove it. And so I thought, well, like, why even have that fight if you don't have to? So if that's not like material to the safety or that you're trying to create, then you can also just kind of like not do the thing, even if you believe it should be done. And for whatever reason, like you don't have to do everything in one project. And maybe 5 or 10 years later, something else changes. Like, well, we want to plant more trees, so we're going to put every third car space or whatever is going to become a tree. Maybe that would be something then. Who knows? But like, you don't have to do it all at once.
Yeah, and in the example you just mentioned, like 1 in 3 might be too much. You might just start with something really small. Like, let's just try 1 on the whole street, just 1 block, in the whole mile.
Just one street. Yeah.
Just 1. And then people will just be like, yeah, what's the big deal?
That's
just
nice.
1.
We should do another one. Yeah.
And then you just go, and I think just a lot of environmentalists don't quite get that, because they want really big dramatic change to happen all at once, and realizing that you just get huge amount of leverage from getting small bits of change to happen, like a little bit at a time.
I think that in the environmental movement, it's people are so, when you kind of look at the facts, you get so overwhelmed by the big numbers and the doom and the gloom, and you think, well, we have to do this all at once, and like nobody should be driving cars at all, because you're just kind of overwhelmed with the scale of the problem. But you're gonna freeze people and shut people down when you engage them in that way. But flipping it around and talking about like, what are the small changes and the fun and the joyful things that we can add, like a tree. Who doesn't like trees, right? And I mean, I think as long as it's like watered and taken care of, and it has a chance to survive and grow, it's like, it would be a good thing to put more trees like in the street, like like in other places you go and you see these like trees actually kind of breaking up the not that much directly in the middle of the road, but along the side, but like in the roadway or in that strip. and that creates even more shade, right? Which cools the block, but also it can break up the line of parked cars, and you can show that like, hey, cars are guests here. Really, this is a place for nature and for people.
Yeah, totally. I wanted to ask you also about, it was a bit while ago back in the conversation, but about the scorecard. What other projects were you competing against? Like you said that you were just got in of the ones that got accepted. How many were there, and what were they like? And were they all from the community? Like because if we're going and asking the city,
community groups, I can't really remember, but I want to say that it was about a dozen or maybe 20 or so projects that were there, and some things were things like a park around a school or something like that, or things that were like community center oriented. Not a lot of them were traffic safety. Hey, there's this public park that needs a new facility. Here's this school that needs a new facility. So they were other kinds of things. It wasn't all streets. In fact, probably a minority of things were streets.
Oh, okay. So this capital improvement program with the city of Oakland is a kind of for anything that comes under capital. It's not just roads specifically.
So they're planning their own capital budget, right? The different departments. And then they also have this public input. So on top of what they were already planning to do anyway, they're saying, well, they're crowdsourcing what should be done in the community. So what will maybe the things that are top of mind for them, but they're still important. They want to give those a chance to be heard.
And were these 20 or so projects, were they ideas that had been put forward by the community, or were they a mix with things that the city had sort of decided to do?
I don't know. Like, I didn't look into them that deeply. All I can assume from the way that the kind of the form what was set out was that they all maybe came from community groups. Maybe it wasn't coming from an individual. Maybe it was coming from that school or people who were friends of that park, right? But I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that these were just a segment of the budget that was allocated toward the citizen requests. But I could be wrong.
And it seems like every city should have some version of that we can basically put our wish list in if we want.
It would be really great if they did. There's a lot of times your elected officials or your department heads or your transit board members, they're not using the city necessarily in the same way that you and I are, right? They are, maybe if they're in a more senior job and they're higher income, do they even live in the city? Do they drive everywhere, right? Is it a police officer, a firefighter, a police chief, fire chief, transit, the bus agency? Is someone on the bus board actually using the bus every day? I firmly believe that if you're going to sit on the board of a transit agency, you should be using it for your daily life multiple times a week, and you should be experiencing it like your customers experience it. And a lot of times that's not true. And I think that the ability to have a system of listening to the public, much like the Lego group listens to its fans and saying like, hey, what ideas do you have, right? They're going to get unsolicited ideas anyway. We built a pipeline for people to share their ideas and form them and structure them in a way that we could actually work with them and decide if it has public support, we could greenlight it. In the same way the city of Oakland said, hey, general public, what should we include in our capital budget? And wouldn't it be great if every city had the ability for the public to give input into that with clear screening criteria and scoring criteria so that you get the right kind of applications and you get them survey, however you do a priority matrix, whatever your city charter, your city's values are around that. Oakland is very heavily focused on racial equity and economic equity. And so the scoring was based upon that. So the research that we did was, well, there's this school over here that serves this population. There are these public housing developments. There are this and this, and these are people who were historically underserved, right? So we were able to highlight the things that were already true in our application that would help on the scoring to help us achieve the score that we need to achieve.
And how are other people who are listening or anybody who wants to take on something like this going to find their own equivalent to the capital improvement form? Because I've had like lots of different calls with people who are kind of involved in sustainability in more of like maybe a designy sort of way. And they're like, oh, we want to do this thing. We want to do this project. And I'm just like, have you looked at your own local city government website? And they're like, oh, no, I don't even know what it is. I'm like, look at it. And then go to LinkedIn and then look at it and I'm there doing a screen share. And I'm just like, look at LinkedIn, look at who works there, type in the keywords sustainability or roads or bikes or whatever.
Right.
And then like 12 people come up and they're like, head of transportation and bikes for city of blah, 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 recycling manager for blah, 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 sustainability, climate. And they're just like, I had no idea all these people worked at my local city. And I'm just like, yeah, they often employ like 10 or 20 people and they have jobs and they have budgets. And they know how the systems work and they're going to want to support you.
And that's someone you can take to coffee and you can say, like, how does this work?
Yeah. So people don't often know, like they haven't engaged, they don't know that these people live there. Like, I mean, how would you suggest somebody starts to get to know, they find their version of Warren and they find their version of the capital improvement form that comes up once every 2 years?
So first, like to look up your city's website, right? And the area that you are interested in. So if it's transportation safety, it's either going to be a Department of Transportation. Sometimes it's the Department of Public Works, which is often more responsible for road maintenance and like storm sewers and things under the street, right? Or traffic lights, right? But you're going to have a Department of Transportation or a Department of Public Works. Look at those. You could look into the people who are involved in your planning and zoning committee. They would know. It wouldn't be necessarily the department or the commission that would be responsible, but they would know all the folks doing that. Anything that's like a bicycle and pedestrian advisory commission, which is often like a somewhat appointed or by application citizen board, right, of semi-love lay people who are giving policy recommendations. You will often have sometimes DOT employees or other city employees sitting on that in their private capacities, right? Because they have an expertise and a passion. So those sorts of board meetings, those are great ways also to meet fellow citizens who care about the same thing you do, because they often have public comment. So if you go and you make a public comment about a thing you want, even if it's not very well formed, and you just say, this is my idea and I want this thing, and you go on the record, but like someone will come up to you afterward and say, hey, I think that's a good idea. Or have you talked to so-and-so? Or the city had already planned to do that 5 years ago. It's in this long-term plan, somewhere. Then you get that long-term plan, and you start reading it and you start seeing everybody who's involved in it, and you start seeing those budgets. You're just gathering that information by a combination of like looking at what your city already has. Like you said, looking in LinkedIn and seeing who these people are, contacting them on social media, right? Kindly, respectfully, but like, hey, here's my idea. Like, could you spare a 15-minute phone call or a walk on the site that I'm looking for? And if they don't respond, then go to the committee meeting or go to the council meeting, and you will meet, whether it's one of the elected officials, whether it's one of the people who are sitting on the committee, or whether it's another member of the public who's been in the audience making public comment. You'll make 1 or 2 or 3 contacts. And if it's a council person, maybe it's, can I follow up with someone in your office? Because they're often in really high demand. Their schedules are really booked, right? Being respectful to them. Maybe you'll get their personal time, but knowing that they have a staff and being respectful to their calendar and saying, is there someone in your office that works on these kinds of policies that I could talk to, right? And then really at that point, I think you're still gathering information, because what you want to do is when you actually make your request, you want to have a vision for what you want. You want to have some of the common objections taken care of, like, is it removing parking, or can a fire engine get around this? Or, you kind of want to know what's going to be, or we don't have the money for it. So you want to be organized. But I think that would be how I would approach it.
I'm wondering, at what point was your job done? Like, once you'd filled out this form and they approved it, was it happening then? Were you just like, cool, my job's done, and then from then on you didn't need to do anything, and then the concrete trucks came out and plants, and there it was. Like, is there a point? Like, or do you have to like keep nudging them all the way to the end?
You kind of have to keep nudging. I mean, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I would just, even though they did all the heavy lifting, if you will, just by staying engaged and by watching like every little thing, that even if it's like sending them an email to like ask for a progress update or like compliment them on some progress you see in the street, or give feedback on the engineering plant designs, right? Letting folks know that, hey, you're paying attention, right? It goes a long way. If you're doing that positively and constructively, then they're gonna want to make you happy. My job wasn't really done. I knew that we had the funding. I knew that we had it scheduled. I knew who the product team was. I knew when they were going to do the work. So I knew that for a year, I wasn't going to hear much of anything. I was still a little bit loud because you could put some concrete blocks in the road and solve the problem right away if you wanted to. Cities are really averse to that for different liability reasons, engineering reasons. That's a whole other conversation about quick build or tactile urbanism. It's really a whole other field of it could be a whole other episode or another guest for you perhaps. So I knew that during that year, I just wasn't going to get a whole lot. I still illustrated the problem so that it couldn't get pushed back, or it couldn't get shelved, or it couldn't get watered down. But when these things get into that process, they kind of take on a life of their own. So keep babysitting it, right? Be really positive, be really constructive, but keep on it. And as it's happening, then give credit and give praise where it's due. Thank your city council person, thank your DOT staff, and you want to be their favorite person, right? They get so much negativity. They get so much demanding emails, insulting. I've watched other constituents get in the face of my city council person out on the street, really, really rude. This guy and I wanted the same things. We were angry and upset about the same things, and the way we handled it was completely different. And what happened was he ended up alienating her, and she became very defensive, rightfully so. I watched it all happen. And at the same time, I've been able to build a constructive relationship because I kept on giving resources and giving encouragement and giving praise, and not demanding and not expecting from someone who's getting all kinds of pressure from all kinds of sides.
That's a really good point, to not to be overly adversarial with these people that are just humans doing their jobs, and they're just getting what it's like if you get a single mean comment on social media.
Yeah.
How it just kind of destroys your day.
Yeah.
And I don't get anything that mean. The mean that I get is incredibly subtle. It still ruins my day.
Right.
And I just think, wow, for people that are getting a lot of it, even if you're famous or whatever, or it's your job to be a mayor and to get 30 hate emails a day, I mean, that's hard on anybody's soul.
It's hard.
Don't be that person. Be the friendly, supportive one.
And I know of a few public officials and unelected staff, just professional staff in this region that deal with a lot of this kind of toxicity and sometimes even hate. And it's a wonder to me that they can get up and keep doing that kind of job. I don't have the fortitude. And sometimes occasionally you hear someone who burns out and resigns. And it's such a tragedy when they're fighting for a lot of good stuff, right? And it just crosses the line and becomes too personal. And so as soon as you get, I think there's a quote, and someone else will be able to attribute it. Maybe you can in your show notes, but it's be ruthless with systems and kind to people. It's an old activist.
Before, but it sounds good.
It's an old activist quote, right? And it's be ruthless with systems and kind with people. And I watch two kinds of people, I think, get that wrong. One for no fault of their own, and the other one is very intentional. One is kind of the average everyday person who doesn't know how the system works and gets frustrated and feels like no one's listening. They don't know any better, right? If you don't know how the public budget works, if you've asked for a stop sign and you've been ignored, or you get the letter that says, well, not enough people have died here to warrant a stop sign, which is backwards, right? And frustrating and alienating. And again, a whole other episode of discussion about why our transportation policy is the way it is. But there's a reason why people get disillusioned with their governments, right? And that's real. It's just not an effective way, I think, to engage, right? But that can be learned. And then there's another kind of person that's I just want to be an internet troll, and I want to be mean, and I want to bully someone, and I want attention, right? And that just creates an unhealthy environment that no one can live in, and everyone's defensive, right? So realize that the people who, if you sign up for that job to work in a city when you have this, you can be working somewhere else in the private sector, or if you sign up to be an elected official and take all of that, not only your political opposition, but then the citizens who are not getting what they want from you, right? Then like give that person some respect, right? Because they didn't get into this for whatever nefarious reasons you might imagine in public imagination. They got into it because they love their community and they want to help their community. Maybe there's some things you disagree on, right? Maybe they're from another party. When you're in a city, we all have to live here and we all have to be safe. We're all trying to solve these problems. So we might have different opinions on how we get there. Some might be more effective policies than others, but we've got to engage each other with respect.
Yeah, and I've just got to say, Tim, after knowing you for a few years, and we've had lots of like deeper personal conversations, and what's really reflected through our conversation about this project of yours is that you have a very high natural emotional intelligence as a person. And what's come through in the conversation is just how much you've been using that natural empathy and emotional intelligence that you have through this process. Like part of it is just, getting the form and some luck with that and knowing about how to do a survey and that you made a Raspberry Pi data sensor. Like they're all the kind of fundamental structures. But if you'd done it without that kind of sort of intuition and empathy for how to be with people, that's kind of been the padding, I think, that has really helped this come through. So I just wanted to just say, like, I recognize that and appreciate that. And I think hopefully the listeners will sort of feel that as well and just remember, like, are you using your emotional intelligence to make the whole process work? Because some of it's dysfunctional, but a lot of it is just these subtler sort of like qualitative essences that we have, like one-on-one with people, how we talk with them.
Well, yeah, I appreciate that, Katie. And I think that comes from the really with the Lego experience, I've been in that community and organizing kind of hobbyist and open source projects for about 25 years. So I started as a teenager and learning how to work with those like really, really passionate fans on a hobby, but then going from that, being a community member to being a representative of the company. And now here I am, I'm like in someone like Warren's position, right? I believe in the cause, right? I want to make things really awesome for the most passionate Lego fans. And I have to work within a big corporate structure. And so I was the guy, it's different than public service. The stakes are far different, right? But it was analogous. And when I met Carol Fife, my council member here in District 3 in Oakland, there were a lot of things that I think we fundamentally disagreed on. But I met her in person and I said, I have a little bit of an understanding, a tiny understanding of the kind of environment that you're operating in and the kind of demands that people are putting on you because I have this analogous role. And that kind of was an opener. And over a couple of years, we built a relationship that was based upon respect and constructive, and me just sharing things that I thought would help her round out her policies on a holistic approach to public safety. And today, she's one of our strongest supporters on Oakland City Council for Safe Streets projects. And she stuck her neck out on some key votes for us that she wouldn't have done if I think she didn't have people around her who were supportive instead of demanding.
Yeah, it reminds me of, are you familiar with Chris Voss? He's got a book out. He's been on a whole bunch of podcasts. He's on Masterclass as well on negotiation. He's like an ex-FBI or CIA.
Yeah.
He's
okay.
really good.
Yeah.
It's really good masterclass. I wasn't going to watch it. I was like, CIA negotiation, what do I need that for? But then I watched it, and what he talks about, which is exactly what you just talked about, is just really coming from a state of empathy and listening and really allowing to hear the other person's point of view instead of like pushing your point of view on them. And starting that way. And then the ultimate goal is to basically get what you want, right?
Well, and find a way to give that person a win, right? The thing that we do now is like, now we can look at everyone who was involved in our 8th Street project and say, this is incredible. This is amazing. All the streets, the neighborhood streets in Oakland should get that. So you're praising them. At the same time, you're demanding more, right? You're saying, this is really, really awesome. Everybody deserves this. Let me help other neighborhoods try to get the same thing. And hopefully, because I did all that hard work of like when there wasn't really a clear process, and now it's a lot more, and if now the city is more willing to do it, they know they can do this kind of thing. I know that we're getting toward the end, and I wanted to give people a really easy way that they can collect data on their own streets. So like I mentioned, I did this whole Raspberry Pi thing, right?
Do they need the Raspberry Do people need to get the Raspberry Pi,
Well,
the indie hacker version?
Only one would dare give me the Raspberry, and that's Lone Star. I don't know if you get that. Do you get that movie reference? But the
No, sorry.
Spaceballs, the Mel Brooks comedy from the 80s. Anyway,
Sorry.
some people will get that. Some people will think I'm just old and weird. And the thing is there's a product that does what the Raspberry Pi did for me, right? And that's called Telram. It's TLRAAM. There's 2 A's. It's a Belgian company. And that's a device that's $200 or $300. And it comes with a year's worth of like cell data subscription. And you put it in your window and it does the same thing that my Raspberry Pi does, except it connects to a cloud interface with a map and it puts all your traffic counts and speeds there. So you don't have to solder any wires together. You don't have to buy a bunch of parts. You don't have to load an operating system and a Python script and do all the calibrate and measure and do all the stuff that I did, right? You can just buy this thing, scan it with your phone, type in your information, tell it where it is, and stick it in your window and give it some power, and it'll count what's on the street. I would show it to you on camera, except I just loaned mine out to another neighborhood in East Oakland for them to do counts on their street.
Oh, it's called Teleram.
Telram, yeah, TELRAAM.
And it's just for traffic. That's its only purpose, is to count cars.
Right.
And speeds of cars.
It counts cars and cars going by, like how many, like a traffic count, and then the speed of each car, and then it can do analysis based upon those 2 factors. It might detect like bikes and pedestrians, but I haven't run it myself.
Was it not around? Is it a new thing? Did you not use it because...
In the last couple of years, it came out, right? So when I did mine, there was not a product. I had this idea that I was going to take like old iPhones and put an app on them, and like you can put them on a pole outside. But I didn't really pursue that idea. Like you release an app, and the hypothesis was a lot of people have old phones, and you could the phone is the entire setup. But I didn't pursue that as a product. And in the process, someone else did, and they made a device that it's all seamless.
But that's so awesome. Like I have like a whole like section in my book on this, and I made this like YouTube video about like why you need to do DIY like hardware hacking. And I kind of feel like hardly anybody watched it. Nobody seems to really resonate with it. I'm like, you can actually do this. You can buy these parts. You look at a YouTube tutorial, you can measure it. And you often think about this technology as like, oh, like if I'm doing tech, I need to sort of build a startup and make it into a business.
Right.
And it's like, no, you can actually.
You can take an open source thing and just connect it together.
Yeah, and like you're not
You're
not a computer programmer
by
training.
Software engineer.
No. You still figured it out. You can buy these parts, and this is fundamental to your campaign. It's kind of what happens when you move to like the Bay Area, isn't it? Like you suddenly realize that you can like build all this like
Katie,
crazy shit.
you and I are both nerds, and we hang out with these people, and we know all these hackers, and it's like, you know it, and maybe if I don't have the skill, I know it can be done. And I think that there are a lot of people out there that just don't know it can be done.
Like there's so many weird stories. I had a friend who lived in Oakland who had like some chickens and was building a garden. And I'm like, oh, what are you doing? And he was like, oh, I've just got to check on like the camera that I built with the automatic like door opening that I built for my chicken. So he gets a Raspberry Pi and then puts a little camera attached to the Raspberry Pi.
So they can like come inside.
Yeah, with like a door opening.
If you're an intruder, it won't open, but if you're a check-in, it will.
Like just like a hand-made, hand-programmed.
Chicken,
like I mean, everybody built like a Raspberry Pi for their like chicken coop thing. It's just like, oh wow, yeah, like you can actually do it.
I'm sure that they have like an AI recognition startup these days, right? It was like it started off with chickens, and now it's like.
Yeah, like in that show Silicon Valley when it's like the hot dog, like the hot dog recognizer. It's like chicken, like chicken thief, chicken versus thief.
Yeah.
Next $1 billion idea. Okay, cool. Before we wrap up, I just want to run through what I've got as the steps, because my aim with this interview, and I'm going to be doing a series of these with other people that have done these type of projects, is to get the A to Z like all worked out. So what I've got first is you've got to have a clear vision. You've got to know what you want, right? And you can draw that up. Midjourney is a great tool. I'm actually putting out a really detailed tutorial on how to do this in Photoshop and Midjourney on my email list. So if anyone's listening, please sign up to helloworlde.com/action tips to get this tutorial that will help you do that visually, but just know what you want. The second thing is you want to try to add it to an existing project. So you look much easier to put an add-on to something that's already happening rather than try to come up with something from scratch. So do some research in your local city to know what that is. Then you've got your survey project. You don't want to just push your idea on everybody. You want to get feedback from the community. So you could do this by going door to door. You said you put signs up on the street poles and you developed this little mailing list of 60 people. And it was kind of cool. Like it sounds like you didn't really need that much tech. Like I think people might think, oh, we need it like an app that like, or a platform that like does all this stuff to communicate with people. Like you just need to get people's email addresses.
I mean, you could use Microsoft Word or Google Docs, and I use Figma, but like,
what form did you use? There's like
Google Forms. It's free. Everybody with a Gmail address has Google Forms.
Yeah, so you can just set up Google Forms, get people, that's sort of like your landing page, and then new people sign up. You can use a Google email list. And then,
I mean, the one thing I didn't mention was I made a simple website and I just used Notion. Mm-hmm. You could use WordPress or any other website builder. I didn't even buy a domain name. I just created a short URL on Bitly and I pointed it to a page on Notion. Maybe those are new words to some folks, but Notion is like this kind of like no code docs kind of interactive environment where you can like build your own kind of like knowledge apps, but you don't even have to do that. Your website could be a Google Doc that people have read permission to. Like you can just go super low tech. You don't have to be in, like I'm into these kinds of tools. And that was like the thing that was easy for me to reach for. If that's new to you, skip it. It's not important. You want like a clear URL, like a bit.ly, like the URL shortener. And you can create like, what's the street you live on? It's like, what's the name of the street? And you can say safe whatever street on Bitly, right? So as an example. And then point it to a Google Doc and give anyone with the link read permission. And that could be your website. It doesn't have to be anything sophisticated.
Yeah. Well, people come to me for advice for their like visions, and people tend to have really big visions for stuff they want to do by the time they're like asking me for help. And you don't need to build like big platforms and multi-million-dollar like games like to do all this stuff. Like go to notion.com and it's basically sort of like a wiki. You can build basic websites and wikis with it. Google Forms, a WhatsApp group, and build your community that way. And that's all you've got to, and that's how you start. And if you want to get a Raspberry Pi, you can figure that out or get the Teleron. Like everybody should be starting their campaigns, building these local groups with just the basic tools that are out there and getting to know real people.
When I sent the email updates to people, really important things, you want to protect people's privacy for trust. And so I would send the email to myself and I would blind copy everyone else. Mm-hmm. That way, like you don't know the history of neighbors with each other, giving away someone's information. It's like, what if I gave your email address to someone that you weren't comfortable with? You want to protect people's privacy. So like doing things like that to keep your neighbors safe and to keep trust. But, I've been taking those kinds of steps. It's really simple.
Yeah, I'm actually going to be doing another email tutorial on that. I'm going to call it like the 5 steps to low-key community activation, because people want to do these huge campaigns. And I'm like, I personally think that you need to do basically what you did with these simple tools and get even just 20 people signed up, like even just 10, and get something to actually happen. And then that's kind of like your stepping stone, or your kind of
have your like cheer squad, and then you're accountable to someone, right? It like motivates. If no one responded, I probably wouldn't have persisted, but I got something out of knowing that other people wanted the same thing and other people were cheering on the progress.
Yeah. And that's what human psychology is, like a group thing. If it's one thing I've learned over the years of doing this, is that you've got to get people together in groups, because you get that support, that emotional support. And that's how change happens. And I mean, and just thread it all sort of back to this, like, I feel like people get overly ambitious with their platform ideas. I mean, I think you've done exactly what every single climate and environmental and road advocate should do, no matter what their idea is, but basically getting the community together in some way with some vision to make it happen. And let's say you've done it once. Let's say you do it now 5 times, and then you do it 10 times. After you've done this 10 times, I feel like you would get a concept for perhaps a bigger platform that was necessary. Like you'd be like, okay, we've done this 10 times now, and now I totally know what is needed. And then perhaps you've got that, then that kind of startup idea will be really grounded in like real work, like this Teleron sort of idea. Like that's an example. Like only by doing it do you know that you need like a device like a Teleron. So there's that company. And then who knows like what other, after you've done it 10 times, like you'll really have it grounded in reality rather than people coming up with like, oh, we want to build an app to tell people the top 20 things they need to fight climate change. And it's just like, we don't need another one of them people.
Get someone to change one thing, right?
Yeah,
like stick with it, and then get someone to change another thing and stick with it. And in the process of doing that, then you're going to learn.
Yeah. Then you want to understand the capital budgets versus the operating budgets. I don't know if that's a step, but it's just one of my notes. Okay, the next step is you've got to do you want some sort of like data collection. So do the data collection as cheaply and easily as you can. Don't think that you need anything fancy. Just figure out how to make it happen with a Raspberry Pi or by hand or a sensor or whatever.
The Teleron was the easier than the Raspberry Pi. Unless you want a nerdy project, it's totally fine to do the Raspberry Pi thing. But taking videos of something happening, taking photos of the aftermath of something is also powerful.
And the essence of the data collection is to turn it into a story. Like data isn't useful when it's just in a spreadsheet. And the data isn't necessarily like an engineering project. It's a storytelling project. Like you're using the data to create a story to psychologically convince people. You're not necessarily doing the data because the traffic engineers necessarily like are going to use that exact data.
They're going to go and collect their own data with their own tools, but you want to get close enough, again, like you said, to be able to tell a story. They came and they did their own speed study, right? After I did mine. But, mine, I couldn't defend that. It wasn't scientific according to their methods, but they have equipment that is. You're just trying to illustrate a point.
Yeah, you're trying to sort of tell the story. So then you take that data and you put it into a social media content form, and then you create a content calendar, which is something that gets used in like marketing. Like once a week or particular days of the week, you say we're putting out this type of content. You cut this data combined with any video or footage you can get, and then you tag the relevant people in the city with this to get their attention on social media. And don't just do it once, do it consistently with a content calendar. A content calendar, for anyone who doesn't know it just means Mondays, we do this. Like you said, Wednesdays, we do this. Fridays, we do that. And it's a really common tool, a really common fundamental process to all like internet marketing now, if you're new to the term. Next, we've got, I think that tagging people with that content, with that data is like really just a gold bit of advice for people. And then you want to also bring in personal stories. So if you can go and interview individual people directly to make the stories not just about data and photos, but also people from the community telling their own stories. Next step is get some press. Start with the easiest possible local press you can get, if there's like a local blog or a paper, and then upgrade to find a friend who works in PR or find a way to get into the NBC local news. But I don't know if local news is really that hard to get because these people have to make news all the time and there's not often like that much going on in a small area. So if you have something that's sort of catchy, you may be able to get the local news to come to you, and it kind of gets that kind of authority and like social proof. So you don't just come across like just you. It sort of sounds more official. Okay. And then you have a little bit of magic happen, which is the mayor's office lets you know about the capital improvement form every 2 years. But we want to perhaps make that happen earlier. Like ask the questions, get to know the people. I think ask a specific question like, what is the mechanism I can advocate for X in the city? And get to know your people. Maybe go on LinkedIn, go on the city council, and then they'll tell you what that is. So you got it out of the blue, luckily, but you want to have it not come down to luck, have it come down to planning. And you also said persistence. Persistence led to luck. Great quote. You just got to keep at it with anything. You've just got to the number one reason why things fail is because people stop working on them. It's not like the government or money or this. It's because we kind of run out of steam. And then you got into the scorecard, and then you had to just sort of keep up with it. And then I got approved with the budget, and I kind of kept nudging it forward, and making that this tip that you added, which is making it a non-contentious thing that adds to the community. Don't try to take too much. Do a lot of like empathetic communication, and just keep nudging it through. Okay, have I summed it up? Yeah.
That's really well done.
Okay, awesome. And now this will also turn into an email tutorial on this process with links to the project, so people can hopefully follow it. I mean, I feel a bit sort of like low-key jealous and sort of lame that like I haven't done it. I'm pathetically bad at like engaging with the local city and doing stuff. I came to one local city meeting once and I just like I wish I could do it more. And this brings back to this idea of groups. Oh, one thing I haven't asked you yet. We'll wrap up with this. It's just, did you didn't do this completely alone, did you? Like did you have like a little like posse, like a group of friends?
We had a little posse, yes, exactly. We had.
But you were the instigator, but then you developed a group of like a little posse around you.
Yeah, we got so wrapped up into the details that I neglected to mention that there were like 5 or 6 folks. Some were just like cheering us on. Some would come to public, like some would come to meetings with me as like moral support. They were all online meetings at the time. Another friend who just was financially well off, like paid for the traffic sensors and stuff because he wanted that to. It was a few $100s of materials, but it was still like at the time I didn't have a lot of money, and so he paid for that. Other people were doing introductions to others in the neighborhood, or just introductions, camera help with the media pitching. So yeah, it was a group of us.
Is like, what are you saying, 5 or 6 people?
Yeah, a quarter of a 5. I mean, maybe up to 10. Some people like were involved very little, right? But there was that core group of like a gradient, if you will. Some people were more involved than others, but I was.
And how did you communicate? Just did you use email, Slack channel? Did you have
text? Yeah, we didn't have a
like
Slack.
Really simple stuff.
It was just email.
Not even a Slack channel. Yeah, I mean, like this is the thing that comes over time and time again. Like that change happens through small groups, and the ideal group size is 5 to 7 people. That's when people optimize. Yeah. And you might have heard
also, these weren't all tech
yeah.
people. So why, if you do a Slack, I've done that before and try to get non-tech people onto Slack, and they're like, they don't participate because it's just a new thing for them to learn. Do the lowest common denominator. Everybody texts, everybody emails.
Yeah. And that's like, if you look at management sort of, I don't know, theory or whatever, they say that you should never have more than 7 people under your direct command. Like that seems to be I think in the military they do that or something. But like, that 5 to 7 people is the optimal group for like just getting stuff done. And once it gets too big, it becomes a bit unwieldy. So to think that you need like, I don't know, like 1 million followers on social media to get like, that's not how it happens. It happens through exactly what you did, getting those people, having a vision, getting them to work together and to navigate all these obstacles this is really like Tim's case study today. It's like, this is how it's done. This is how it's done. And without fancy PhDs, billions of dollars of funding, like huge social media followings, like it's what you've done is the gold template for how real change happens in the world. And I'm so glad we got to talk about it because I learned a lot. I knew about it already, but I got amazing to hear about just all the detail, and also I learned a lot. And I mean, how does it feel? I mean, you mentioned that you were going through a bit of a hard time when you started it. Do you think this process of engaging with the community and having a meaningful project, do you think it like helped you get through this like
it certainly helped.
Dark patch?
It certainly helped, yes. Well, it wasn't the total solution, but at the same time, like it was something that really kept me going during that time, and it gave me a purpose that was outside of myself. And so yeah, I don't recommend that anyone go through a hard time and then that's the reason why you do a traffic calming project. But if you are having a really hyper local positive thing that you can do in your neighborhood and then seeing traction on it can do wonders.
Yeah, but just like having like a close-knit group of people that you work together on a meaningful project, like I think that's a fundamental ingredient to sort of being happy and having good mental health. Like I think we all need those human connections and those sort of projects of purpose. Yeah, cool, awesome.
Well, thanks so much.
This was so fun. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so thrilled that we'll be able to get this information out to people. Do you want to add anything more about like how people can learn? You've done a whole like Notion sort of Wikipedia about the process and see photos or contact you.
Yeah, I have a couple of articles that are on Medium. I'm working on yet another one now. The project is done. So I think that those are probably the best ways. I know I need to finish this article very soon and get it posted. And then so we can share that. I mean, I am available if someone has a really specific project they want to talk through and get some pointers or get some advice, then they can always just get in touch with me and I can see if I can make time for a brief call. It is going to be different if you live in a different city or a state or even a different country, right? The way things are done where you live are going to be different than Oakland, California. But I think that the principles here applied broadly.
And are you part of like a wider support network of other people? Is there like a America-wide kind of group of people like you where you all like get in touch with each other?
There's not really necessarily one nationwide group. There are groups that are national in scope that are mostly focused on policy at the federal level. There are state groups that are focused on policy at the state level. What happened after our project, and people saw success from the 8th Street project, is that I started meeting with people who I knew from Twitter. We would go to a bar and they would be frustrated at the problems on their streets. And combined with a group of activists in San Francisco that were memorializing when a driver would kill someone and wanting the city to act faster. Well, I learned that one of those activists from the San Francisco group was my neighbor a few streets down. And so the group of us started meeting together and wanting the city to take bigger actions faster. And so we ported over the vigils, the memorial vigils from San Francisco into Oakland when someone who was kind of known in the local community was killed. And then we kept going. And then that group grew as there was this sort of like focal point, right, of an action, right? And then we would invite press and we would invite city council. And that got all of us together under really unfortunate and sad circumstances and frustrating. And we were all very angry, but that turned into a group of folks, and we have a Slack channel. We call ourselves Traffic Violence Rapid Response. And that is an Oakland-based group of people who lobby the city at all levels, who create, media attention. We give comment on designs for bigger street projects to make sure that they have really well done, like concrete protected bike lanes and protected intersections, or the bikes are actually shielded from the cars at the intersections. We do things for neighborhood traffic calming. We do things for racial equity in the sense that we're looking at the streets where people are disproportionately affected by traffic violence in lower income and minority communities. Everybody can kind of find their lane in this group. It's not top down. It's all very bottom up. And so the people who are interested in one area of the cause meet on one thing and the other people meet on the other thing. But we all are unified by our desire to make the streets of Oakland safe for anybody who's outside of a car, and even drivers themselves, because people get killed when they're driving a car from the bad street designs also, right? So we want to make it safe for people to walk, for them to bike, for kids, for seniors, for disabled people, for low-income people who are going to work, right? We want to make the streets safe for everybody like that, and not, dominated by this really aggressive and reckless and careless driving, people looking at their phones, getting all the stuff, all the problems, right? We want to flip that over on its head and make our streets safe and warm and welcoming for people. So a group emerged out of these individual efforts, including the 8th Street effort, but more people wanted to replicate that. And so you can actually use an individual project, maybe before you even build a movement. It's like, do a project, get some success, people are inspired, and then you can iteratively build a movement.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it'd be good if there was, like, there should be some sort of like community, just sort of like group that you can join, almost like a religion or something. You can just like turn up and like get to know people. And there's all like the other people that you can like mentor you and help guide you through
there's various subreddits that are all like anti-car kind of subreddits, and there are YouTube channels like you can follow, and you can kind of like find community or folks through people who follow these various influencers and things of that nature. There's maybe not one overarching group, but I think a lot of people cluster around content creators, or they cluster around like their local bike coalition, right? Or local, like a retired AARP association, American Association of Retired Persons or something like that. Seniors are affected by this a lot. And that group has come around. They're not super focused on it, but they are receptive. So if you're a senior, you can get involved with your AARP and find community there. Many such examples. Maybe that's a whole other, I think this is finding connection about this is a whole other conversation.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to do it sometime. And now we really have to wrap it up because in a few minutes, I've got to jump on to interview Karen Farr, who you introduced me to. And so you
wonderful.
guys, your podcast is going to be coming out
Yes.
back to back, kind of about the same related topic.
Amazing.
So
I love all of his work. He's a great guy and all of his work is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I better go now because I've got to get wrapped up, rest my voice before we jump into another
right.
hour and a half conversation about traffic changing details. So
Great,
thank
Katie.
you so much,
Thanks
Tim.
so much.